Hey, welcome in. Back at it. Jason Priestro, the Clemson Insider. Right here as we are every week, 7 p.m. sharp. Want to first mention the sponsor, A-Glass. Get yourself a free quote, myaglass.com. You see it running down there at the bottom of the screen. They got all your auto glass needs, replacement, repair. Free quote today, myaglass.com. 2 locations in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Guys been in business forever. And there's a reason why they've been in business that long. Doing things a little bit differently tonight. We doing a lot of you already saw we have gone back to back here. Me and Vandervoort did his show a minute ago. He's gonna jump on and join us here for a little while tonight, however long he wants to hang around. We kind of let the fans dictate the or drive the conversation here, as I like to say. So we kind of tend to go wherever they want to go. I usually do a little quick monologue before we start. We already did that already, though. Not a whole lot left to say. We kind of touched on all that. Here were the bullet points. Clemson gave one away. We can't believe Sammy Brown wasn't on the field in the fourth quarter. Clemson had like 5-6 missed opportunities to go up double digits in that game and kind of put their foot on South Carolina's throat and could not take advantage. Y'all add y'all's thoughts and we will jump on them.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me be here, buddy.
Oh, my pleasure, man. The more the merrier. Outlaw says, I do believe SMU is getting ready to face a ticked-off Clemson team. Do you feel like a dominant performance by Clemson is going to happen? We kind of just touched on this a minute ago. You want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Outlaw, I don't know. I don't really know if they're going to – I know they're going to be – I wouldn't say ticked off. I think they're happy that they got another opportunity. I think Dabo said it best last night, JP, in his Sunday teleconference. He says, well, for the first time in a long time, we control our own destiny again. So they're kind of happy about that. They're kind of happy that in their eyes, they're in the playoffs now. Like the playoffs have just started for Clemson. And they said they're kind of excited about it. Are they pissed off? Probably, because nobody likes losing, right? So, I think they're pissed off in that standpoint. But I don't know if they're pissed off in the stance that they're going to go out there and kick SMU's butt, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. You would hope that they're a little ticked off after what happened Saturday. Seem to be a little ticked off by some of the things we saw after that game Saturday. Listening to Dabo, he says they're all ticked off. Losing is a great motivator. You hope to see that Saturday, and I think it's going to take that kind of effort because we talked about this a little while ago, but we don't really know what SMU is. We think we know what they are, but we're not sure of what they are just based on who they played this year. Sure, you can put the common opponents together and try to create a narrative, but it's still a small sample size. I think a ticked-off team is definitely better than a non-ticked-off team, though. Clemson's had some opportunities to control their destiny. They had it up until the Louisville loss. They had it again this weekend. You beat South Carolina, you're probably a lock for an at-large bid no matter what happens with Miami and Syracuse, and they squandered that one away. So 3 times now. Don't want to go 0-for-3 in the same season. You need to take advantage of this one, and not just to get yourself into the playoff. What happens in this game Saturday is going to dictate a lot of the narrative surrounding your program as you head off into the offseason. You lose this game to SMU, you're going to be seen as a program that is headed on a downward trajectory, while your in-state rival is seen as one headed on the upward trajectory.
No, you are absolutely right, buddy. That's exactly what the situation is going to be if they don't win this game. This is a great opportunity for Clemson to get into the playoffs and kind of change that way they're looking. Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they this way? If they lose it, there's no doubt everybody's going to be like, Clemson's on the way down.
Oh, this is what you were looking for here, Will.
Okay.
Should Clemson go after Miller Moss for a portal QB? I don't know that Clemson's going to go after a portal QB. Not after flipping the Denson kid from Coastal the other day. Now, that's assuming both Cade and Vizina come back, which, listening to Dabo the past month, he sounds pretty confident both are coming back. So I'm just going based on that. You get both those guys back and you bring in the freshman this year. And especially if Pierman stays, I don't know that you need to go to the portal for a QB. It's particularly harder to land one when he knows he's not going to be the starter. Most of those guys are in there because they want to play. Dabo's definitely not going to the portal looking for a starting quarterback. I do think Clemson's going to go to the portal. If you look at kind of the way they've reacted to some of these decommitments, you look at the decommitment of Bryce Davis, look at the decommitment of Isaiah Campbell, and I think Campbell would have ended up playing defensive tackle, but he told me more than once that they took him as a defensive end. So that's 2 defensive ends lost. No effort to replace either of those guys. I think there's your dead giveaway. Clemson's going to look to address defensive end in the portal. Because I think you don't have anybody set. I don't think you got anybody set to come off scholarship after this season, but I do think you're going to see 1 or 2 defections, and it's going to leave you even a little thinner than you are. But Clemson needs somebody that can come in and kind of bridge that gap to, let's say, the Watford kid or even Hoffler if he's not quite ready to step up next year. They need another able body at that position, maybe more than one. And I think that's a position they're going to look to address. I don't know about quarterback, but I think that's going to be one.
Yeah, I'm with you, buddy. I think, first of all, unless Cade Klubnik leaves, Miller Moss ain't going to come to Clemson because he knows he wants to go someplace where he's not competing for the job. He's won the job. He's the guy already. So there's no way that's happening. I'm with you 100% on that. As far as the defensive end, you're absolutely 100% correct. They have to get somebody in at defensive end. Me and Robert talked about this today. What if something had happened to TJ Parker? What would they have done? Right? I mean, they right now have no depth at all at defensive end, and they got to go out and get a couple of them, not just one. I'm with you. I think they got to get 2 defensive ends in this transfer portal, and they got to be hungry, and they got to go, and they're going to have to pay for it. That's what they're going to have to do.
They absolutely cannot take the philosophy they took into trying to land those offensive linemen last year. They kind of, based on what I could see anyways, they kind of treated it the same way they would if they were recruiting a high school guy. And everything in the portal is just sped up. Clemson likes to make sure all these guys visit before they even offer, and they were trying to do that with some of those portal kids last year, and it doesn't work that way. If you look at these last 2 kids that they flipped, the offensive lineman they flipped from Kentucky and the quarterback from Coastal, I can't find any record of either one of those guys ever visiting. So they got offered without ever having visited. So that seems to me like a change in stance, so to speak. The Denson kid, I know he's there at Coastal, but he's not from this area, or he was committed to Coastal, but he's not from this area. I can't find any. I've never heard of him visit. I went back and looked, and I couldn't find any record of him visit. I don't think either one of them ever did. So that is a change in philosophy for Dabo there. I don't recall that happening in a long time. So maybe that is one of the many changes we're going to get in this offseason here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Dabo's comments last night. You wrote the story about the portal, and it's the first time where he's like basically said he's going to be they're going to go after people. They're going to get in the transfer portal. Now, I'm still like a lot of Clemson fans. You got to show it to me. I don't believe it yet. I got to see it to believe it, Jason. I got to see it to believe it.
There's a lot of fans that believe what they did last year was just for show to appease the fan base. I don't believe that. I do believe they went about recruiting the portal the entirely wrong way, but hopefully they've learned from those mistakes, and you won't see a repeat performance. Chad, has Isaiah Campbell committed anywhere, and where does Clemson go now with DBs? Do we look for high school kids, or do we look portal? Isaiah Campbell is going to announce on signing day. It's Clemson and North Carolina and Tennessee. I've been saying for a while, no matter what he said publicly, Clemson was out of this thing, man. He wasn't ever coming back to be a part of this class. There's reasons why he left, and nothing's changed since then. But as far as the DBs go, I'm not sure that they I'm not sure they take a cornerback in this class now. Maybe they think about adding one in the portal. I'm not sure they do. It might just depend on what kind of if they have any unexpected attrition, because none of those guys are set to leave. You get Shelton Lewis back, you get Terrell back, you get Ashton Hampton back, and you get Corey and Gibson and Tavoy Fegan back, two guys we kind of forget about, don't talk about because they redshirted this year. That should be of tremendous value next year, and they got a year under the belts. And at safety, you lose R.J. Mickens and probably lose Tyler Venables, I would imagine. But there's still a lot of guys in that room that they're really high on. Maybe they look to take a body, maybe not. I don't think it's the highest priority because you got guys like Kylon Griffiths, Rod Coble. I could go on and on and on. I forget some of them names, but there's a bunch of those kids that they still have, they believe in, and they think they're going to be good players that really haven't gotten a whole lot of opportunity yet due to, Mickens coming back this year and Venables being healthy this year, even though he didn't play a lot. But and then also you got Khalil Barnes coming back. So I wouldn't, I don't know. I'm not expecting them to take a corner in this class. I mean, I also wasn't expecting them to take a fifth offensive lineman, but they surprised me the other day and flipped the kid from Kentucky. So, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't.
Here's what I want to ask you, because they did lose some guys that were safety targets. Do they go after a guy? Because I've told me and you talked about this. I think Koval may go into the transfer portal. He's one of those guys I think could do it because he's been passed on the depth chart now. Does he enter the transfer portal? And if he does that mean Clemson goes out and gets somebody to replace him, because they're going to need, like you said, bodies, but also somebody who maybe is a guy that can feel like can come in and provide some depth and not just be a body. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you see some unexpected attrition or some guys leave out that, haven't been playing a lot, Koval's an absolute prime candidate. He's been here a couple years now, Will just said he's been passed on the depth chart. He's listed third on the depth chart right now. Maybe a lot of that will depend on what they think of some of those older guys on the roster. Like the two Kylons, Griffin and Webb, and they got Ricardo Jones. That's who I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
Freshman that played a lot.
He's been playing a lot last couple of weeks. Yeah.
And it's just going to depend on what they think of those guys. I just don't think it's going to be. If you're ranking the positions of need, I don't think it's at the top. Maybe in the middle somewhere. Here's one right up your alley. Is SMU better than the USC team Clemson beat 2 years ago for the ACC championship?
That's a good question. They got a dynamic quarterback. I would say Drake May is probably ahead of Keith Jennings as a passer. That's going to be the interesting thing in this, right, JP? Because Keith Jennings he's not a bad passer, but he's not like Drake May, where he's going to complete 70% of his passes and stuff like that. So, that's going to be an interesting matchup. I say they're better because they're better defensively than that North Carolina team was, right? Wouldn't you agree that this is a better overall team because they're better? They're good on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, we talked about it in the last hour. Everybody talks about that SMU offense, but the defense just doesn't get mentioned a whole lot. They give up less than 100 yards on the ground per game, 300, I think I said 40-something yards per game total offense. Yep. Those are really good numbers. Will mentioned it earlier. They're top, what'd you say, top 5 in the country or top 15?
Top 15 in the country in total defense, yeah.
I mean, some of that's probably due to who they played, but you don't put up those kind of numbers if you're not good.
Exactly.
So this going to be a good challenge for this Clemson offense. Again, they've got to be better than what they were Saturday, or at least more consistent, and a little more aggressive. Aggressive.
Yeah, SMU 326 yards a game allowed. Their average yards per play, they're ranked number 1 in the ACC. 4.6 yards allowed per play. That's pretty salty in my book. In rushing defense, let's see where they're at in rushing defense. Let's see, rushing defense. Number 1 in the ACC in rushing yards, as you mentioned earlier, JP, 95.8 yards per game. And here's the one I always look at. You look at the yards per game, but the main stat is yards per carry allowed. They're allowing just 2.8 yards per carry. That is getting it done on that side of the ball. And let's see where they're at when you look at the other side of the ball, running the football, right? Where are they at yards per carry running the football? SMU, they're pretty decent, 4.53 yards per carry. So that's getting it done on both lines of scrimmage, right? And that's kind of where you want to be. You want to be controlling the line of scrimmage. And right now, SMU does a better job than Clemson, as at this point right now, of controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Because Clemson, as we know, and everybody listening and watching the show, Clemson doesn't control anything when it comes to run defense right now.
SMU's running for 178 yards per game. That's
pretty solid.
That is pretty dang good.
Yeah,
James,
and I want to go ahead. Go ahead,
buddy. James asked how many more recruits Clemson's going to lose. Is 7 not enough for you? God. Yeah, signing day is Wednesday, and man, we have seen a lot of decommitments and flips today, yesterday, the weekend. I can't guarantee you with a 100% certainty that Clemson doesn't lose anybody else, but I don't think they do. I think Amari's solid. He's even tweeted it out. He's signing with Clemson Wednesday. He's doing a little ceremony there at South Lawrence, I think at 10:15 in the morning. I think all the other guys are too. I don't think, me personally, just based off some of the people I talked to and talking to Amari himself, I don't think he's wavered as much as it's been reported by some other, people that cover other teams. I know teams have never stopped coming after him and coming after him hard, but I don't think he's ever really, really wavered that much. I'm not saying he never thought about it or considered it. I don't think he was as close to being gone as some people made out. But, I don't see any more guys leaving. And I don't know if there's going to be another surprise or two before Wednesday. Because again, when the Caddis kid flipped from Kentucky the other day, I had no idea that was coming until he announced it. I had just finished doing the Jordan Young stuff when he decommitted and flipped. So we'll see. That when Clemson does that stuff, they kind of do it in the darkness of night. Sometimes you don't hear about it until it pops. Jay says it doesn't take 12 games and 3 losses for a team to get ticked off. That can be a game-to-game type thing. I think sometimes people forget we're dealing with human beings here and young human beings at that.
Right.
You could get, let's say you will off 5 wins in a row and you're playing as well as you played all season long. Sometimes maybe a little complacency can set in. Sometimes, when you get dealt a loss like you got dealt the other day, it's a wake-up call. At the very least, it ought to serve as a motivator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like, they lost to their rival, and they're devastated by that. You know what I'm saying? And, that sucks in and of itself. And I mean, nobody hurts that they lost that game. None of you fans out there hurt more than Clemson does losing that game. Cade Klubnik, guys, was crying after the game. Okay. He was crying. That's how upset he was that they lost the game. He put everything into it. I can guarantee you there's guys in that locker room that were crying. So they're good. They know they got an opportunity to, Barrett Carter, for instance, right? Here's a guy who came back for this opportunity, right, JP? He came back for this opportunity, and now he's got a chance to do it. Yeah, so he's going to be motivated, but it's going to have nothing to do with what happened last week at South Carolina. It's going to be what they do now, starting today, Monday, and up till kickoff on Saturday. What they do between now and Saturday is what's going to motivate them to win this game, whether they're pissed off or not. I mean, they're pissed off because they lost to South Carolina. That's why they're pissed off. But they're not pissed off because they're going to go play an ACC championship game. That's going to obviously lead them to an ACC championship. No, that ain't how it works. They know they're playing a good team, and they got to get their emotions in check before they play SMU because they don't want to be pissed off. They want to make sure they're focused on SMU.
John says Cade has something to prove. Hope he plays calm and gets it done. I thought Cade played well for the most part the other day. The biggest thing was, it was all right there in front of him for him. It was all right there in front of him there on that final drive when he drove him down there to the 18. He had his chance to etch his name in Clemson history right there. And, he makes a bad decision. He should have never even thrown that pass. Then it was a bad pass on top of it and ends up in the hands of a defender. Maybe he does maybe he feels like he's got something to prove to himself. But Will mentioned it a minute ago, he was crying. And that's not the first time we've seen that this year, but he's an emotional dude, especially he's not used to losing. He's had to get used to it while he's been at Clemson. He never lost in high school. But, maybe he does feel like he's got something to prove to himself, after the way that game ended the other day.
Exactly. And listen, when you take the stats and you compare Lenore Sellers' game against Cade Klubnik's, they both threw an interception. It's just Cade came at the worst time. But Lenore Sellers, let's not forget, he threw an interception that Khalil Barnes intercepted where at? Inside the 5-yard line, right? I mean, that's a big deal. By the way, Cade had 2 more yards than Lenore Sellers did in total yards. Cade threw for 280, ran for 62, finished with 342 total yards. He was 24 of 36. Cade had a great game. If Cade goes out there and wins that game, Cade's remembered as the guy, but it turns out he made the pick at the end of the game, threw the interception at the end of the game. But Lenore Sellers, when you look at Sellers' numbers, now he ran for 166 yards and scored 2 touchdowns, but he was 13 of 21 passing. That's not better than 24 of 36. He had 164 yards. Cade had 280. Cade also ran for 62 yards and ran for 2 touchdowns himself. Cade averaged 6.2 yards per carry. Cade played well. I mean, Cade played good enough for his team to win that game, and he did everything he could to win it. He made one bad decision where he should have thrown the ball out of bounds, like we talked about earlier, but he didn't. He tried to do something that wasn't there, and it cost Clemson the game ultimately. Unfortunately for Cade, that's how it rolls. But as far as the way he played, Cade played his butt off for Clemson the other day, and he did everything he could to win that game.
And he made some big boy throws, particularly in that first half. He made some big boy throws. I thought they got a little conservative there as the game went on in the second half. Man, he made some really good throws in that first half. And there's probably nobody, down on him as much as he's down on himself for that last throw. I bet you he wishes with every fiber of his being he could have that one back.
Oh, absolutely he does.
Seem excited about the Kentucky offensive line flip. Is that a good pickup or just a filler? It's not a filler. Let's get that out of the way first and foremost. Clemson was only originally planning to take 5. Now you got a 5th. How many injuries they had this year probably factored into that decision. I'm really not the guy to be asking to evaluate a high school offensive lineman because I am not that kind of talent evaluator, especially for offensive linemen. I haven't even watched any film of him. I'll just say this. If Matt Luke wants him, I view it in the same way as Mike Reed. If Matt Luke wants a guy, or Mike Reed wants a guy, they get the benefit of the doubt with me every single time.
Yeah, and JP, this hasn't been said enough because Clemson lost the game. Clemson's offensive line did great the other day, guys. They had guys that are banged up that played hurt, and they didn't give up any sacks to those defensive ends. They got nothing. They got no tackles for loss. Clemson averaged over 4 yards. I think it was like 4.5 yards per carry, if I believe right. And so Matt Luke, as you just mentioned, man, that guy says he's good. He's probably good because Matt Luke is a hell of a coach and he's a hell of a recruiter. And I'm with you, JP. You trust him, man. You trust what he does.
Yeah, I think the one sack came from the linebacker, and I think it came on a play where they thought they had caught him off sides. Because something looked funny about that thing from the get-go.
No, you're correct. Right. No, you remembered it correct because I said the same thing. I said it's like everybody thought the play was blown dead. And South Carolina got a sack out of it, and that was their only sack of the game. And it came on it was a safety blitz, actually. Yeah.
What is the problem with the defensive tackles being out of position? Is it Eason or Goodwin? I'll let you take that one.
It's a good question. How about it being someone on the players? Because I see Nick Eason laying into him when he gets them over on the sideline. I don't think it's the coaching. I don't, because I see Nick coaching. I see Nick coaching them. And if you guys want to watch somebody coach his players, you watch Nick Eason in between defensive possessions. Okay. So I don't think it's definitely not Goodwin, because Goodwin doesn't coach the defensive tackles or that. He's just set calling plays during the game. So he's the linebackers coach. What's going on there? I think it's just players sometimes just not being in the right position. Remember this year you had Peter Woods, who played defensive end a lot. I think you had a lot of that. I think that played some of it, right? I mean, because Peter Woods was out of position a couple times, and that might be just because he'd been playing defensive end too, and so he's got to get back to playing the 3 technique. So, and I know it's happened throughout the season, so I'm not just going to say that's the reason. But I tell you, K-Park came back off injury, so he wasn't completely healthy the other day. There's a lot of things that can play into it. But I definitely don't think it's coaching. You're going to blame it on coaching because you have to, but I pay attention to the guys coaching on the sidelines in between possessions. I know JP does as well, and Nick is as good as it comes when it's that stuff.
I've had somebody try to tell me for the past 2 or 3 weeks that there's no intensity with the defensive coaches, and I'm like, man, you got to be watching on TV because you can see it, in the timeouts and those kind of things, and we've seen it at practice. And I know you know it. There's plenty of intensity inside with those defensive coaches, and it starts with Nick Eason. Chris Rump's got plenty of intensity. I know that we're getting kind of into the weeds here and off topic, but I think we kind of forget that the players have to go out and execute the game plan, and sometimes they get forgot about, and nobody wants to blame the players. It's always the coach's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. Player got to go out and execute his job and not be out of a position, not get over aggressive, do those kind of things. And I think that's where Clemson's had some issues this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, JP, I think I'm going to drop off because I got to get some stuff turned into Robert. But, man, appreciate you today. Appreciate you coming on my podcast and enjoy the rest of this podcast. And, guys, keep throwing the questions at him. This guy knows his stuff, man.
Appreciate it, Will. And always a pleasure to join you there, man. Always.
All right, buddy. I'll talk at you later, man.
All right, man. All right. While we have a little pause here, let me mention my sponsors again. A-Glass, for all your auto glass needs. You can get you a free quote, myaglass.com. 2 locations, Florence, Sumter. Those guys will take care of you. Auto glass replacement and repair. Auto glass replacement and repair. See if we can get that right. Any chance we get Murph after his visit Saturday, or did South Carolina get a leg up with him? I'm telling you now, Clemson was in this thing more so than some would have you believe. I've had more than one source tell me that, especially after the official last weekend, Clemson needed to win in front of him Saturday. What they didn't need to happen was him to see South Carolina win, him see that quarterback perform that way, him see that celebration on the field, and have the perception that one program's headed in an upward trajectory, the other one's headed in a downward trajectory, and this thing's over now. It's over. He is South Carolina bound. Why is Maffa the only running back? The false start by Haynes is a lack of snaps this season with the first team. We are the only team I know of that only uses one running back mainly 99% of the time. You know, if you go back over the first half of the season, Haynes was getting a lot more carries than he is now. And he wasn't very effective, to be quite honest. You know, I know he had the big game against the Citadel, you know, but that's a big jump down in competition. I tend to think it's more about trusting him in pass protection. I think Moffa's the guy they trust there. I think even though he's banged up, he's still able to play. And my thing would be on some of these third and shorts, why not give Adams a shot or even Haynes a shot on some of those? You know, mix it up a little bit. But I just think they think that he's the guy that gives them a better chance to win. That's what I believe. Even if he's not fully 100%. Drives me crazy how the play calling always goes into conservative mode after we get the momentum. Why? Yeah, I thought they got a little conservative in the third and fourth quarter. And, you know, as I've said before, I don't like to dive too deep into play calling because we don't ever know what the play call was. You don't know if the quarterback, you know, checked out of it, or a lot of times there's an RPO, or, I mean, there's just so many things that goes into it. The play caller might be calling one thing to set up something else. But, you know, there were a few in this game that left you scratching your head. The third and short where Cade, you know, they go with a 50-50 ball down the field. The third down where they did the outside run to Maffa again that they tried already before earlier in the season on a fourth down and it didn't work. You know, I didn't really have a big problem with the reverse where they fumbled. Somebody just stepped on Cade's foot. You know, it just kind of is what it is. But, I mean, there were a couple of things. There were a couple of times there I felt like they got conservative, and I was not a big fan of it. Not only up one score. You know, that's part of the reason why South Carolina was able to hang around. It's part of the reason why Clemson lost. They just weren't able to take advantage. They got 3 turnovers in that game. They recovered an onside kick. That's basically 4 turnovers. They did not score on any of them. They didn't turn any of those into points. When you win the turnover margin, you should win the game. Simple as that, especially when you win it by more than 1. And who knows if Cade doesn't make the bad decision there at the end, maybe they win the game. He also, you know, even during that stretch that we're being very critical of them now, saying how conservative they got, he had Wesco wide open for a touchdown on a slant route. He just missed him. He just overthrew it. You know, if he hits Wesco there, he's off to the races. Nobody's catching him. It's 21-7. Or either 21-10. I can't remember if that was right before the field goal or after the field goal. But either way, it's a 2-score game, and it's probably over. You know, so, I mean, it absolutely felt like they went conservative there a little bit. I can't tell you why. You know, that you would never get them to say they went conservative. It absolutely felt like they did. But I also, you know, it's not something I really like to go that in depth because I don't know what the guy's thinking is calling the plays, and you never know which play is designed to go where, and if the quarterback did what he was supposed to, and those kind of things. It's kind of it can. I don't think it's as cut and dry as we make it out to be a lot of times. I think it's far more complex, and it's something that's easy to critique, and it's something we all do. Don't get me wrong, I'm not singling you out, Todd, by any stretch. I mean, it's something everybody does. That's kind of why I've tried to stop doing it a little bit. But, yeah, it does feel like they go conservative sometimes. I would absolutely agree with that. Clemson is done. Recruiting is 37 in the country. It's over. Well, if it was over after one recruiting class, no. Every time somebody has a down recruiting class, and it depends on what service you're looking at. The one I looked at says they're 29th. They routinely finish somewhere between 8th and 18th. It's not nearly as, bad as you're making it out to be here. How did Clemson let Mr. Football runner-up go to Carolina without – who are we talking about here? I don't even know who the runner-up was, to be quite honest. Our goal is to not lock up the state. No, the goal is not to lock up the state. You'd like to do it, but, it's not reality. Probably more than half this state grew up rooting for South Carolina. At least half of it did. You're not going to – those are battles you're rarely going to win, especially with guys that grew up South Carolina fans. I mean, there are exceptions to that rule. Don't get me wrong, but there are not a ton of them. But if you tell me who you're talking about, I might can be a little more specific. Defensive ends is one of the most expensive positions in the portal. Going to be fun watching a non-bidding Clemson program try and find two. When you say non-bidding, that's a little misleading because Clemson does pay that. They do put out offers. They just don't get into these big bidding wars. But you might have eyes on the wrong kind of player. Not all of them are these expensive, productive, high-end productive guys at big Power 5 programs. Look at the value South Carolina got and a guy like Kennard or the guy they poached from Georgia State a couple of years ago. Those are the guys you should be looking at, not these big-name guys that are going to be commanding seven-figure deals. Clemson will be looking for guys they can get that they think are – how can I say it? A great value. Let's put it that way. They can get value in and are productive at the same time. And those guys are out there. You see it on a bunch of teams throughout the country every year. You have interviewed and been around Dabo for a long time. I sense a level of arrogance with him during his interviews. I missed the Roy Bus portrayal he used to give us. I think there is a level of arrogance with all, football coaches, to be quite honest. That's not specific to Dabo. Yeah, there's a little arrogance there and there's some ego there, but I think all football coaches have that. I think all of them have to have that. I would be willing to even go as far as say that maybe, after that second national title, maybe a little complacency set in inside that building over there. But I do think it's something that he has worked hard to correct in the past couple of years, going back year for last year. I just don't know that it was something that can be corrected overnight. It might be something that takes a couple of years, and we'll see if he takes another couple, step or two this year. If he thinks there's something else that needs to be corrected, let's put it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think all football coaches have a level of arrogance, and sometimes if he doesn't like a question that you ask him, there's ways he's gotten on reporters in the past, or maybe there's a look he'll shoot you. I didn't get the impression he was very pleased with me when he got asked about, Sammy not playing the fourth quarter after the game Saturday night. But it kind of is what it is. But yeah, I do. I think there's arrogance with all those guys. Dabo has to be willing to talk money and not keep pointing to July when they talk money now. They're not waiting until July to talk it. I do think they were a little slow in getting really specific with some things with some of these guys. But I think they're there now and have been for a little while now. So yeah, they're absolutely talking money with these guys. Just because he goes out in a press conference and say we don't lead with it doesn't mean they don't talk about it. They had these big NIL presentations at these big recruiting events, man, and those kind of things. To me, where they got a little lost in the weeds were they were not, maybe going into as much detail as they should have been early on. You knew this was coming in July. You should have been talking about it months ago instead of waiting until, a couple months back or whenever they started really getting specific with it. But they're doing that now. Some of the biggest problem is you got a guy like Jordan Young. Let's just say Jordan Young. We all know Michigan's throwing all this money around. They come in and offer, let's just say, for example, they come in and offer Jordan Young twice what you were offering him. So you got to decide, hey, is that guy worth it? If we give him that much, he's probably going to be making more than some of the starters on our roster. And we don't have the money to pay this guy and the starters that kind of money. So then at that point, you got to make a decision. You just let him walk, or you decide he's worth it, and then you're going to have some guys on the back end walk. It's just a fine line. I think they've been having to walk here in the past couple of years. Some of it, I think, we talked about it last week. I think some of it's from their own doing and not being aggressive enough and trying to raise NIL money. But at the end of the day, you got what you got, and they got way less than a lot of other schools. Think Clemson needs to get some linebackers somewhere and get some size. I would have linebacker on that list too. I would probably, as far as, portal needs, I would probably have defensive end at the top of the list. Linebacker might be number 2 because you're losing Barrett. Obviously you got, Wade coming back next year. You got Sammy. Kobe McLeod should be fully healthy, but you don't have anything past that. You got one freshman in the 2025 class who just tore his ACL. So he's probably, he was likely a redshirt anyways, or that would be my guess. But either way, he's probably not going to be able to help you much next year. Now, although I get it, coming back from ACL injuries much quicker these days, but no need to rush a true freshman when you don't have to. So that is a position I could see him maybe looking to add a guy to. I would probably rank it defensive end, linebacker, number 1, number 2. Defense has regressed under West. Is he the linebacker position coach also? He is. Should we hire a dedicated linebacker coach to allow West to focus on the overall defense? He's got some guys that help him coach linebackers too. I do think, in West's first year, the run defense was good. The pass defense was not. Last year, the defense I thought was good enough to compete with probably anybody in the country. If not for that defense, you're nowhere near 9-4 last year. They really shored up that pass defense. It made massive improvement. The run D took a little hit because they started playing more nickel, so you're a little more susceptible to the run. But they were still really good. This year, it's not been, particularly the run defense, man. It's just been bad in stretches, and really bad. And I didn't think a lot of guys, particularly through the first three quarters Saturday, I thought they had the right scheme. I thought the guys were in the right place far more often than not. I thought Sellers just, they didn't do a good job of bringing him down because they got hands on him. They were getting pressure on him. And to his credit, he's strong as an ox and he can shake guys off. But you can't let him break that many tackles. It's not like he was just running free all day. But yeah, the defense is taking a step back this year, absolutely. And if you're Dabo Swinney, you gotta take a hard, long look at why and what needs to happen in order to fix it. Do you think West is the guy capable of fixing it? And if not, do you decide that it's just time that you need to find somebody else or get him some more help? I think there are a bunch of options on the table, but I would absolutely agree that the defense has not lived up to expectation this year. Yeah, we don't know about Micken's status yet, and no, Cole Turner's not hurt. Sammy Brown is the backup at Mike. He's not third team. There are a number of linebackers that could rise next year. Not sure it's a deep need. Jamal Anderson is one. Yeah, we might have to agree to disagree there. I think, and I hate to say this, but I think Jamal was a bad take. He's one of those kind of, and that's not because I think he's a bad player. I just don't. I don't think he fits what West wants to do. We've seen it all year long. West likes to, he likes to run that 4-2-5. And not that 4-3 with more of a Sam style linebacker. If you're running a 4-3 and using a Sam, Jamal Anderson's your guy. But if not, I don't know where he fits in, man. He's just so undersized. He's wiry. Maybe he's one of those hybrid type guys. I think he weighs 215, 220 maybe, if that. He just doesn't have the size that you need to play inside, either at middle linebacker or at weak side. And I just don't know that he's a good fit for what they do there. Now, if they decide to go back to 4-3 and start using more Sam, which I kind of doubt because, let's face it, you run nickel because teams spread you out. And that's what most teams do, and that's why you want to run the 4-2-5. I just don't know that Anderson's a good fit for what they – if West stays, and which I assume he will be, and what they want to do moving forward. What is Clemson's biggest weakness? Clemson has talent, but is it more technique or mind game in critical moments? I'll tell you something I heard the other day that stuck out to me. South Carolina has 32 seniors. 32 seniors. How many seniors Clemson got? They, in some positions out there the other day, those was grown-ass men playing against 18, 19-year-old kids. To me, that is one of the biggest things in the portal area that has impacted Clemson. Most of the guys that leave are backups, but at a certain point, those guys are going to get older and start playing more. And when a bunch of your backups are leaving and you keep replacing them with high school guys, you stay young in a lot of spots. And if you look at receiver, Clemson's really young there, starting 2 true freshmen. You look at running back behind Maffa, really young there. Jay Haynes is a redshirt freshman. Easy redshirted this year. You got another one coming next year in Davidson. You look at, at corner, you're playing a bunch of underclassmen this year. You're playing a sophomore at one defensive end spot. You started the year with a sophomore at the other defensive end spot. You're just young in a lot of places. For me, I think that's one of the biggest things that has impacted this team. The portal's killed the depth. So when you have an injury, you don't have the kind of depth that you had 5 years ago. And it's also made it a very young team. And young teams tend to make mistakes. And this team has been prone to making some mistakes sometimes in the worst of moments. But that's probably not the answer you were looking for. Because, if you look on paper, they're still the most talented team in the ACC, but they're not near the most experienced. And, sometimes it's better to have grown men, even if those grown men were 3 stars coming out of high school or, whatever. They have now developed into pretty good football players, and you got them matching up against, 18, 19-year-old kids. Sometimes that's going to lead to mismatches. My opinion, what did Clemson do Saturday that ultimately cost them the game? Not take advantage of opportunities. There are going to be people that scream from the mountaintop about Sammy not playing that fourth quarter. And to me, that was coaching malpractice, but that is not what cost them. That defense gave up 17 points. That should have been enough to win the football game. The offense had no trouble moving that ball in the first half. Cade was making some big boy throws in that first half. They made critical mistakes. The 4th and 1, Peyton Page misses his block. Maffa probably should have took that up the A gap instead of the B gap. But either way, if Peyton Page hits his block, that's probably a first down. I kind of understand not wanting to kick it there with the issues you've had in field goal kicking and stuff. But in hindsight, maybe you should have just kicked it and got the points. It was a chip shot field goal. That's not where you've been having them blocked this year. It's been in the longer ones. Then you turn the ball, or you got 3 turnovers and an onside kick. That's basically like getting another turnover, and that gives you 4 extra possessions. You get no points out of them. So the biggest thing that ultimately cost them that game was not taking advantage of the opportunities they had. Hell, they even had another opportunity late in the game when Lenoris left them with over a minute left to go score. Cade takes them all the way down the field, and he just makes a critical mistake. You cannot throw that ball to Maffa there, even if it's on target, not picked off. He's going down. He's got nowhere to run. There's defenders everywhere. You got to call your last time out and kick it and tie it up. You got to throw that away and, take your chances on the next play and see if you can win it there. It was just a critical mistake. That is what cost Clemson this football game. Not taking advantage of the opportunity and the critical mistakes. Thoughts on Blake Miller going pro early? He sidestepped that. Yeah, most of those guys tend to sidestep it. It'll probably depend on what draft grade he gets back, which probably come back probably soon. I can't remember when they come back exactly, but I think it's any time now. Probably next week after the ACC championship. But you listen to Dabo talk, man, and he seems pretty confident they're going to get, all those guys back next year outside of Marcus Tate. Maybe he's already told them something, or maybe that's just Dabo being overly optimistic. But we'll see. I could see it playing out either way. To be honest, it wouldn't shock me if he decided to go. I kind of lean towards thinking Antonio Williams will go pro. So there's going to be a guy or two that decides to do it. And then obviously you're going to have some portal defections too. Tell Cade to quit throwing high fastballs. Geez, that was at least 3 missed third down conversions. I remember one, 2 actually. I remember 2. The last one wasn't really a fastball. The interception wasn't really as much of a fastball as it was off target. I thought Cade played pretty well for the most part. Like I said earlier, I'm sure there were 2-3 throws he wished he had back, including the one to Wesco that would have went for 7 and then the interception. But all in all, man, it's hard to put a whole lot of blame on him. You know what? I forgot about C.J. Cooper-Taylor. He's redshirting this year. I think they got a lot of value in that guy. I think he was extremely, extremely undervalued by the services. Saw Neff was advertising IPTAY points for 110 donations. Yeah, they came out with that last week. They announced that stuff last week before the game. They talked about bringing in somebody to do that kind of stuff. Half this fan base does not understand the difference between IPTAY and the 110 Society. But that's Clemson's fault, man. That's 100% Clemson's fault. You got to get the message out there. You got to be better with your messaging. And they've just not I'll tell you what I heard Saturday, good. I'm glad they're starting to, incentivize, some of this stuff and giving the points away and stuff. Man, that's something that should have been done a long time ago. You're kind of late to the party with that thing at this point. But you kind of are where you are. We'll see what happens. Outside of that, I didn't really hear a whole lot different, to be quite honest. I shouldn't say I didn't hear a whole lot different. You like the things you hear, but, we've heard those similar type things in the past outside of the, incentivizing some donations. And they're only incentivized, for a year. That's not forever. They're only doing it until the summer of next year, I think June or July. So, after that, it's I guess back to status quo. They seem to think there's going to be all these guardrails placed on NIL, due to the House settlement, and I just don't know that they're going to hold up. And maybe Dabo was right in what he said last week that, the guardrails have already been agreed to. They're in place. They'll be in place for the next 10 years. And, if they get, sued over them, whatever, maybe they change after that 10-year thing. I don't know. All that stuff's above my pay grade, but I tend to believe NIL is not going away, that even if you do put some guardrails in place, people will find ways around it. It's a critical piece of the puzzle, and it is a piece that Clemson has fumbled massively. And let's be clear here. Not because, it's not because Clemson doesn't offer NIL money. I'm not saying they're broke, anything like that. They offer high school recruits NIL money. There's all kind of myths, what they do and don't do and stuff like that. I just think they don't have nearly as much money as most of these other schools have. But at the same time, I think a lot of that's by their own doing. Yeah, we're not allowing trolls in here, man. If you're gonna jump in here just to troll, I'm gonna beat you out, and that's gonna be the end of it. What do y'all know about Martha's health? Martha's been banged up since the Georgia game, from my understanding. So, I mean, it's not like something that just happened last week or the week before last. He's kind of been playing banged up all year. Something they feel like he can play through. Something he feels like he can play through. That's kind of where you are. Everybody on the D line wanted to be a hero. I think Easton will have a good squad next year. It's something that Clemson struggled with all year, man. They just get a little over aggressive, and it leads to over pursuit, and some running lanes get left open. I mean, they were using a spy on Sellers in that fourth quarter Saturday. Woodaz was the spy, and he was still beating it. I just think it looked like the Clemson had the better team, but South Carolina had the best player on the field, and the best player ended up beating the better team. And that if you're a Clemson fan, that one's got to sting, man. It's got to sting bad, because it was there for the taking more times than one, and you just squandered it away, and you let them hang around, and that guy made you pay. They made you pay. It's kind of simple as that. But there's a lot of talent up front on that defensive line. I still think they need to shore up at defensive end. I like the way Lawson's coming along. But still, this year was the perfect example. You got to have more than just two or three, because once Woods went down in the first half of the season, man, the run D went to crap in a hurry. It just goes to prove how important depth is. It's really lame. Fans blame coaches all the time. If your scheme and play calls suck, fine, but players are the ones on the field. College is about recruiting, period. Always has been. Yeah, the first part of that, yeah, I do think sometimes coaches take too much of the blame, and the players kind of always get the benefit of the doubt. man, you know, players got to execute, coaches got to coach, players got to execute. And, you know, there's probably, you know, a little bit of there's probably enough blame to go around. But, you know, I thought there was some coaching malfeasance in that game Saturday, mostly with taking Sammy Brown off the field in the fourth quarter. I will never, for y'all that was not on the show that we did from 6 to 7, we talked about it in depth. But that is a decision I will never wrap my head around. I will never understand it. You know, they didn't really do anything different in the fourth quarter. Dabo said they were expecting them to do something different in the fourth quarter. I never noticed them doing anything different. You know, I would say, why not wait until they do something different before you make that change? And especially after you see you're getting gashed with Sammy on the sideline, now why not run him back out there after they go down and kick the field goal and pull within 4? You know, but you know, Sammy's standing on the sideline there. You know, he's basically in Wes's back pocket. Dabo's standing there too. It was almost like they were daring South Carolina to run the ball. It just made no sense at all. And I am of the opinion it was coaching malpractice. And y'all know me, if you've watched this show long enough, I don't really get down on coaching too much because, like I always say, I'm not in the building. I don't see what goes on. But to me, that was a bone-headed decision, and it played a big part in costing you the game. I still think the offense cost you more than anything, but, man, you cannot overlook the fact that not having Sammy on the field in the fourth quarter was a big part of the reason why you ended up losing. Just remember in 2022, we lost South Carolina in the Valley, beat UNC the next week in the ACC Championship. Something tells me doubt fuels this team, and when their backs are against the wall, they show up. Yeah, you know, that's a good point. And that was a North Carolina team. I want to say they were playing well down the stretch, but I can't remember for sure. Man, my memory sucks these days. But, you know, with Drake May at quarterback, they just whipped North Carolina that night. I think this is an interesting matchup, man. I think there's still a lot of unknowns about SMU, just mostly because they've not really played anybody. And that's not a knock on them because, you know, if you're a Clemson fan, you've heard that argument used against you how many times over the past decade, they don't play anybody. Just because you don't play anybody doesn't mean you suck, doesn't mean you're not as good as the next guy or, you know, as good as that team in the SEC. It just means you haven't had the opportunity to show it yet. And SMU's going to get an opportunity. You know, this will probably be their toughest. They did play BYU earlier in the year, but, you know, I tend to think Clemson's a little bit better than BYU, so this will be their toughest challenge of the season. And, you know, they're going to have the chance to put their stamp on the ACC in their first year in the league. And I'm of the opinion that is a terrible look. You know, you let a G5 team come in here and win the league in the first year. I mean, I get it. It's SMU. They got all that oil money. And Rhett Lashley brought half of Miami's team with him when he came to SMU. But yeah, I don't know, just from a perception standpoint, when you let a G5 team come in here and win your league, I don't know, that would leave a sour taste in my mouth. Who will be the running backs if Maffa is out for SMU game? I don't expect Maffa to be out. Let's start there. But I would imagine you'd probably get Haynes and Adams, and you probably would see some EZ too because, you know, you can play as many games in the postseason as you want, and it doesn't count against a red shirt. And you'd probably get a committee there with a lot of Haynes and a lot of Adams. But I would expect Maffa to go again this week. Will Tyler Brown play this week? You know, Dabo was asked that last night. He said they were going to try to get him ramped up and practice this week, but he's not practicing a while. So, we'll see. I kind of have my doubts since it's been so long since he's practiced. But it sounds like they're at least going to try to get him ready to roll. I see a lot of questions in here asking me about coaches getting fired and stuff. And yeah, I'm not gonna I'm not going there. I apologize, but that's just something I'm not gonna dive into. Maybe after the season's over, maybe we maybe dive into that a little bit. But yeah, but I'm not gonna answer questions. Do I think so and so gets fired, or who I think where I think some changes are going to be made on the coaching staff? Those kind of things. We will after the season we can address those. Eason and Ruff are on it, and Dabo is coaching them up, but I don't see that Skeletor intensity. Well, number one, you don't have to be a maniac on the sideline that needs a get-back coach to be intense. There's only one person that intense, and I think that's a big part of the problem here. Venables is gone, and somebody wants that same kind of, they want a Venables clone on the sideline, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but he doesn't exist. There's only one Brent Venables, and I'm telling you, man, Nick Eason is not far behind Venables when it comes to how intense he gets. Rumpf is pretty intense. You got Ben Boulware on that sideline. Yeah, he's only in his first year, as a coach. He's an unpaid assistant, basically. But that guy's intense. I've seen Mickey Kahn be intense. Heck, I've seen West be intense. You don't see it a lot, but there have been time. It happens from time to time. There's more intensity on that sideline than it's given credit for. I'll just say that. I'm not convinced all these decommits are just money. I think the trajectory and constant negativity online is having an effect. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, man, but all but one have been all about money. All but two have been all about money. A fifth one was a big part about money. It just wasn't all about money. And the very first one, the Jalen Beckley kid that decommitted way earlier in the year, that one was not about money. The rest were either all about money or money heavily impacted decision. I mean, you're talking about schools coming in here offering these kids double what Clemson's offering them. I mean, I think most people would jump on that. Okay, somebody has said it out loud, so we got Ryan says he has heard Haynes was a fumble machine in practice. I have heard similar things. You said it out loud, so I'll say I've heard it now. But some things you just don't say. I also think if you go back and watch Haynes the first part of the year, the first half of the season, when he was getting more opportunities, he was going down very easily. Something a lot of us, were talking about a lot last year with Shipley and Maffa both going down, especially in the first half of last season. Looked like those guys were going down the first time somebody made contact with them. They went down way too easy. That's what I saw with Haynes the first part of the year. He's a liability at times in pass protection or picking up blocks. You go back last week, even against the Citadel, that big run he had. The play before that, he missed a block that got Antonio lit up. It's not just about what you can do with the ball in your hands. You got to do all the other things when you're not running the ball. And I think that's where Jay's still got some growth. He's still got some growing to do. And it's something you're not going to see on the television. I just don't think they trust him at the level that they trust Maffa. I think they trust Maffa far more than any of those backs in that room. I've said that many times. I just hadn't really gotten into detail. But yeah, I've heard this very same thing. I've not heard it termed this way, that he was a fumble machine. But I did hear a few weeks ago that he's put some on the ground in practice. Hello, CJ Spiller. Saw him 3 times in person as a player. Love him as a school ambassador, but is he truly a D1 running backs coach? He's in his, 3rd or 4th year. He's going to keep getting better as a coach as he goes along. I haven't seen a ton to gripe about as far as running back development. I think a lot of Clemson's rushing issues not this year, but the past few years have been offensive line related more so than running back related. He's starting to show some chops on the recruiting trail. He's went and got out and got the guy he wanted in the last 2 classes, and he had to hold off a furious push to keep the one he's got in this class. But is he the best running backs coach in the country? No. Is he a serviceable running backs coach? Yeah. I think he is, and I think he probably gets better every year. He's really just getting started. And I know that's going to lead to somebody saying, well, Dabo should go hire the best in the country, the best running backs coach in the country, yada, yada, yada. And I understand all that. I get where you're coming from. But CJ Spiller is not one of the hires that I had an issue with, and I've never had. The portal window starts next Friday, 2 days after signing day. Do you really think this is Riley's offense? Because it looks nothing like – yes. Was it Riley's offense they were running at TCU, or was it Sonny Dykes? The route trees are different. The spacing along the offensive line is different. There's a lot of things in football that cross over from one offense to the next. When he came here, he revamped the entire playbook. He kept some things and he added a lot of things. So, I mean, if you see some things that look familiar, that's probably because there's something in that playbook he wanted to keep. But, man, he probably cut 70% of it and kept very little. He might have cut more than that because they got about 30% now. They got about 30%. I think he said 30% of the plays that they were running before he got there. So they got a lot less to learn, but he revamped the whole thing. Dabo's not calling the plays. This is not the same offense that it was 5 years ago. You got to know what you're looking for. And a lot of the reasons why it doesn't look like the offense they ran there at TCU for that 1 year he was there, or I think it was 1 year. Might have been, was it 1 or 2? I can't remember. But Sonny Dykes has big influence on that offense. And a lot of times, execution, pure and simple. And I'll add this: Garrett Riley never takes this job if he doesn't have the keys to the car. Now, I mean, people are going to believe that or they're not going to believe it. It does not fit the narrative a lot of people want to push. I have talked to many people in the know about this very subject, and Garrett Riley has full, total control of the offense. Lenoris was the run. Oh, you're asking why Clemson didn't recruit Lenoris? Well, that's kind of easy. Number one, Clemson already had their guy, Chris Vizina. And Lenoris's recruitment was a little weird. It didn't play out like most recruitments do. He didn't, I know he come up here and worked out at Clemson camp. I think it was before his junior year. Can't remember, but he didn't go out and work out at all these bunch of different camps looking for all these different offers. Kind of let his play speak for him on the field. And he ended up committing to Virginia very early. Very early. Kind of wanted to play for Robert Anae. And he stayed committed to Virginia until Bronco Mendenhall, abruptly stepped down. Robert Anae ends up at Syracuse. Lenoris decommits, flips to Syracuse, or ends up committing to Syracuse later. I can't remember exactly how it played out, but stay committed to him for a while. And then South Carolina gets in late and grabs him. But, he didn't start to blow up until his junior year, and then he got hurt. And he missed the rest of the season his junior year. When he completed that blow up that he had began as a junior, he was already a senior, and Clemson had long had their guy. Murph had tiger gloves on Friday night for Irmo. Well, I have heard this is a done deal. It's over. And what happened the day after Friday night played a big part. If you heard about any effects of Neff Dabo's recent request, it's not even been a week. So, they put out the press release or the letter from Neff that said they're getting a $3 million donation, but that's not stuff that gets talked about a lot around here. Not to me anyways. Feel like there should be a minimum with NIL money, a cap, so these big names. Yeah, it's illegal. The Supreme Court says you cannot do that. Also hire a special teams coordinator kicking the field. Clemson, Mike Reed is your special teams coordinator, and there are either 2 or 3 coaches on the staff. I forget. I can't never remember if it's 2 or 3. Sarian can tell you. There are either 2 or 3 more coaches on the staff that have no responsibilities but coaching special teams. Here's a very good point. Playing so many young kids on defense takes time. The kids are not used to playing within the systems and playing responsibilities first. In high school, they get away with being able to rely on their talent, and what used to work in high school doesn't work anymore. And some of these kids, it takes a while to learn that. Yes, if Cade hit Wesco on that slant, he'd still be running, and they would have won that game. Was there ever a time when Clemson had a spy on Sellers? Most of the fourth quarter. His last touchdown run, Wade Woodaz was the spy, and he got sucked up into the trash and got covered up. He screwed it up. To me, the biggest weakness is in game plan and adjustments. That's another thing, man. It's easy to talk about, but you don't know. Sometimes you don't know if you're seeing an adjustment or not. You don't know what the game plan is. You might think you do, but you probably really don't. It's easy to critique those kinds of things, but most of the time, and I'm not necessarily saying you, but I've seen so many people today talking about how Clemson didn't make no adjustments Saturday. The hell they didn't. They made an adjustment in that fourth quarter. It was just a wrong one. It was a bad one. They make adjustments all the time. You might not see them, or they might not end up being the right ones. But I see so many people talking about we just never make no adjustments. Sometimes they adjust and they ain't the right adjustments. But when you say we don't make no adjustments, or critiquing the adjustments, I wish people would say what the adjustment should be, if that makes sense. The true weakness of immaturity we have is at QB. Sometimes you can tell who's been around some of these kids and who hasn't. I think he struggled with some of that last year, but not this year. Why not bring in Captain Kirk to assist with the linebacker? And see, you do that, you got half the base saying Dabo's being a homer and hiring the Clemson guys. Kirk's on the staff already doing what he wants to do. And do you know that Brian Dawkins wants to be a coach? Coach what? I think Clemson's safeties coach is just fine. And that's what Brian Dawkins played, right? Wasn't he one of those hard-hitting Hall of Fame safeties? No, Antonio isn't leaving. He's still a redshirt sophomore and doesn't have enough tape for injuries. I might would take that money right now. I might would take that bet. I do not think Antonio is back in Clemson next year. I can't answer any questions on what the chances of somebody leaving through the portal are. I don't have any idea at this point. I'm not even going to, make any assumptions on who might or might not. And once the season's over, we can start talking about that. I have not heard about anything about, what happened with Trey Williams there. There was another thing with Zaire Patterson where a fan threw a phone in his face and he knocked it out of the way. The funny thing about those clips is you don't ever see what leads up to that stuff. But no, I haven't heard anything about that. Avion Terrell hasn't been playing good. We can agree to disagree on that. I thought he did not have a good game against Pitt. Thought he had a pretty bad game against Pitt. But outside of that, I think he's been pretty good, especially for a sophomore. Talked earlier about Dabo going after commitments to other teams. Do you still feel the same way? I'm not sure what you're asking me about here, but yeah, Clemson will absolutely recruit guys that are committed to other teams. They've already done it they've already flipped 3 guys in this class. You're gonna have to be a little more specific about what you're asking here, and I'm about to have to jump off here. We already run way over, and it's past my dinner time. I'm trying to scroll through these things and make sure I didn't miss something that hadn't already been discussed. This I agree with. I do think Cade still got another step he could take, more room for growth. Absolutely. Cade should have tucked and run on last play. He had 20 yards in grass in front of him. Instead, he made the worst decision and throw possible. He definitely made a bad decision, but I don't know that he should have tucked it and ran. I'd have to go back and watch it again. To me, you want to throw the ball there into the end zone. If it's not there, throw it away. You only got one timeout left, and when you call it, you got to bring the field goal unit on the team. I just don't know about running it there. If you throw it, you can get 2 shots. I mean, obviously, if it breaks wide open before you take off, sure. But I don't know that. I don't remember him having 20 yards of green grass in front of him. I mean, I think they were on the 18-yard line. I want to say he was fixing to get lit up by one of those ends because for some reason he had flushed out of the pocket. I tend to think he should have air mailed out the back of the end zone. SMU looks solid compared to their games against common opponents. Yeah, me and Will talked about that in the earlier show. It's still a small sample size, and I don't like to use a whole lot out of the Louisville game because I just don't think Clemson showed up that night, period. And SMU broke Pitt for sure. Blew their doors off, and Pitt never won another game. But again, it's still a small sample size. I think Clemson's defense has got to play like it, kind of like it did against Virginia Tech, first half against Pitt, before it did the way it did a lot of the day Saturday. They do that. They got a chance to win that game. But the biggest thing is the offense is going to have to score some points, man. Offense is going to have to score some points. They can't go missing in action after they score a couple of touchdowns. They got to keep the foot on the gas. Absolutely. They are better. They are better than their defense is better. It doesn't get talked about a lot. They give it up like, golly, 340-something yards a game, less than 100 yards rushing per game, top 15 rush defense. Those are good numbers no matter who you play. SMU is no longer a G5 team. We got to drop that BS narrative. They would have been out of G5 years ago if it wasn't for the death penalty. I'm not dropping that narrative, man. I'm not – see, I think people are taking this thing the wrong way. I'm not trying to knock SMU. It's not a slight towards them. I'm just talking about from perceptions. The ACC is already labeled as the weakest power conference. And whether you like it or not or agree with it or not, last year SMU was a G5 team. I don't care the reason why. They were a G5 team. And if you let a G5 team come into the ACC and win it in the first year, that's only fueling those perceptions of the ACC being the weaker conference. And nobody's going to change my mind about that. You cannot agree with it. That's fine. We adults, we can agree to disagree. But again, it's not a knock on SMU. I think they have performed exceptionally well in their first year in the league. Outperformed my expectations. I think Will actually picked them second or third in the league this year. I can't remember. I'd have had them middle on the pack if I was at the ACC kickoff this year and turned in a ballot. But that doesn't change the fact that if they win this league in the first year in the conference, you are going to have narratives out there suggesting that it's one more sign that the ACC is this weak conference because a team that was a G5 team a year ago came in and won it, going undefeated in league play in their first year. We don't got to like it, but that's going to be the narrative that some people push. That's why I think it's important. Another important reason Clemson wins. I already think the ACC doesn't get enough credit. I think the ACC is probably a good bit better than what it's given credit for this year. I think there's a lot more parity in the league this year. Now, am I saying this is good as the SEC? No. I still think the SEC is the best power conference out there, or conference period for that matter. I don't think they are this year what they were last year or the year before that. But I do think the ACC is better than what it's given credit for. And the narratives all the time how the ACC sucks. How many people out there now saying the ACC shouldn't get but one team in the playoff, even if Clemson were to beat SMU and the Mustangs lose? You got people out there that think they shouldn't make the playoff just because of what conference they play in. And if they win this league, I'm telling you, there are going to be narratives out there using them winning or they're going to use them winning to push their narrative that's one more example of the ACC being weak. All right. Kind of run through these right quick. What do you think about the officiating with the no calls on the personal foul cheap shots? One from Gamecock O-lineman TJ and another by Dylan Stewart punching the Clemson player. Yeah, I didn't see it, so I can't really comment on it. And I haven't gone back and watched the game, and I'm probably not going to. But I thought the referees let them play. Let's put it that way. I saw both teams get away with some holds. So I thought for the most part they let them play. I'm trying to think if there was something that was kind of egregious. The only thing that I can remember off the top of my head having a problem with is the overturn catch on West Coast, the overturn on West Coast catch there on the sideline. I don't know how you called that catch on the field, and I don't know how they had enough evidence to overturn it. But I didn't watch it on television, so I didn't see the cheap shots. Bryce Davis doesn't even count. Bro committed and recommitted multiple times. Yeah, Bryce Davis committed to Clemson originally, and a month later flipped to Duke, and that's been it for him. All right, let me see. Make sure I have not skipped over anything here that we have not already covered here. All right, goodbye, buddy. We're not having no trolls in here. I don't care about opposing fans coming in here and want to talk like grown-ups, man. But if you're gonna get in the comments and just troll, I'm gonna boot you. Should have thrown to Antonio more on Saturday. I can't remember if we talked about this in the first hour or after we got on here, but Antonio had 0 targets in the fourth quarter. 0 targets. I think Antonio is NFL bound more than likely. As we sit here today. Now, I might change my opinion on that a week, 2 weeks from now, but as we sit here today, I think he's NFL bound. We've talked about Sammy earlier. No, it wasn't the right decision. All right, I don't really see anything in here. A bunch of trash talk, which is fine and dandy. Ain't no problem. I like enough trash talk as long as it's not trolling. Is Dabo's job in jeopardy? No. Clemson cheats, irrelevant. Dude, I don't give a damn who cheats and who doesn't, man. If you think you're here, Jesus Christ, some of you guys are not nearly as good at trolling as you think you are. Will Clemson get a punter in the portal? I had not thought about that, and I was having a conversation with my boss today, and he mentioned that. You got Jack Smith kind of waiting in the wings, the big 6 foot. I mean, he's 6'5", 240 something, kick the crap out of the ball. Dabo hasn't really talked a lot about him since he's been here. He's been here, golly, 2-3 years now. He might be a redshirt sophomore now. But when he has talked about him, he's mentioned some inconsistencies. So it might just depend on how they view him. If they think he's ready to take over, it'll probably be him. If not, maybe that's something they take a look at. Did you cover the blue chip commit at K-State that was tweeting about wanting to go to Clemson? Actually, it was Adam Guthrie that tweeted about. He put out a tweet talking about flipping him, and he tagged some of the Clemson coaches. If the cornerback himself actually tweeted that out, I didn't see it. And no, I've not talked about it. Let's just say I've actually talked to both guys. But let's just say Adam told me that he did that because he knew the kid always had an interest in going to Clemson. But the guy's committed to K-State, and it's going to stay that way. Do I think the 2025 can be committed? It can be good. He's got a lot of potential. If you watch the film, he needs to add some weight. He's way on the light side. He's listed at $175. He probably doesn't weigh that much. They get a little generous with those things, but he's a lefty. He can move around pretty well. He doesn't have what I would call elite arm strength, but he can make some of it. He looks like he can make all the throws, and he's pretty elusive. It's probably looks like there's something to work with there. All right. I think with that, I'm going to bid you guys adios. We've been on 1 hour and 50 minutes. I actually make that 2 hours and 50 minutes because I've been sitting here since 6 o'clock. Sorry about the trolls that were in here tonight. That's always going to be a thing when a rivalry game, though. Before we get out of here, don't forget my sponsors, A-Glass, for all your auto glass needs. Need a quote? Check them out, myaglass.com. You can get a free quote. 2 locations, one in Florence, one in Sumter. For when you need a glass, check out A-Glass. Appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight. We will be right back here next Monday. We will wrap up signing day, talk about the ACC championship game. Who knows? Maybe we even have another decommit to discuss. Just kidding. I'm not sure you're going to see another one, but stranger things have happened. Let's just say, let's hope we are just recapping signing day and recapping the ACC championship game. And from a selfish perspective, I'm hoping we're talking about a playoff game because I have yet to cover one in person. So that is something that I am very much looking forward to. So I need Clemson to help me out a little bit here this weekend and win this thing and punch their ticket. So we shall See you guys next Monday. If you've not already done so, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Check us out on the site, ClemsonInsider.com. See y'all next week.